Okay, we are going to hold on just for a couple more minutes so people can continue to log on and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining our digital SafetyCon on finding and fixing hidden hazards. Once again, we have 5 vendors here to talk about their own products or procedures that may help you identify and then solve a variety of hazards in the workplace. We also have Katie Olson from Connie's Safety Consulting team, who will talk about applying traditional safety techniques and risk assessment pertaining to COVID-19. This webinar was originally scheduled to be about an hour long, but after talking to the vendors, we may go over a little bit. If you need to leave before it's completed, we will have this posted on our website shortly for you to view. We do not plan on having a live question and answer at the end, but please make sure to ask your questions throughout using the questionnaire feature of the webinar, and we will make sure to get those answers back to you. So again, thank you for joining and enjoy the presentations. First up, we have Rod Thompson from NPS talking about their spill control assessment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rod Thompson. I am the National Account Manager for NPS Spill Control based out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. NPS Spill Control is a preferred supplier of Connie Safety who distributes a wide variety of our NPS Spill Control products, including absorbent pads, rolls, socks, and spill kits to assist everyone with their spill control needs. Unfortunately, spills happen. And when they do, Connie Safety and NPS Spill Control have the cleanup solutions available to help clean up those various spills. To assist everyone on this webinar, NPS has a great spill control survey checklist that I will now review with you. Connie Safety reps, you can review this checklist with your customers over the phone. And end users, you can use this checklist to assist you to evaluate your spill control needs in your facilities and then get back with your Connie Safety rep to help put together the spill control plan that we've identified from this checklist. So with no further ado, going to our checklist, if you're the Connie Safety rep, survey date, you have put your information on here. And if you are the end user, this is for you as you're identifying your walkthrough through your facility on spill control needs. So on the absorbent survey, what we have here is what manufacturer products are you currently using? These are all competitor products to NPS spill control, but they are probably out there in the field, and I want everyone on this webinar to know what those are. If you are currently using NPS spill control products or spill fighter products, thank you very much for using those, and hopefully we can just build on what you have now at your facilities with Conning Safety. What spill control products do you use? So oil only, maintenance, chemical, pads and rolls and socks. What we want to make sure of is that you know the difference. Oil only, pads and rolls and socks only absorb hydrocarbons. So if you have a lot of water and oil in a particular area of your plant and you only want to pick up the oil, you definitely want to use the oil only pads. We have a universal maintenance high visibility pad, and we also have a hazmat pad, and those are all available right now through Conning Safety. So on your checklist, just mark down what you're currently using right now on pads, rolls, socks, whatever spill kits you might be using right now, rags and wipers, or any other spill control products that you might be using. Are there any areas in your facility that you have major concerns with? That is what we want to review during this walk around. Any major slip and fall concerns? Is there liquids leaking into an aisleway that there might be a problem? And where is that? You can jot that down. One of the things that I've done for years, and I'd love to stress this point, areas of the facility to survey, remember to look down and around. So look at the ground, especially on the walkways. What is the condition of the primary walkways and the aisleways? Is it dry and slip free? Or is it wet? And if it is wet, that's a slip and fall possibility. So list your potentially unsafe conditions in those walkways and aisleways and identify that area so your Conning Safety rep can work with you to get the right absorbent products in that area. When you go to the shipping and receiving areas, do you have a fueling pump at your area? If yes or no, jot that down. Excuse me. And do you have any absorbents or spill kits in the fueling area, the shipping area, the receiving area? You have a lot of deliveries that come to your facilities. We want to ensure that you have the product and absorbents needs that are there in pads or rolls or in spill kits in case, God forbid, you have a spill, so we can assist you in cleaning up that spill. In the production and machine areas, what types of fluids and coolants are you currently using? Is it an oil-based? Is it a water-based? Do you have acids or caustics? We have products at Conning Safety stocks right now that we can help you with. Are fluids reaching the floor? The condition of the work area, is it dry and slip free, or are there some wet conditions there that we need to identify and get some absorbents to help you in that area? Are there absorbents visible in the area? So in case you did have a spill, is there a spill kit or a roll or a box of pads in that area? And what type are they? Is it an oil only pad? Is it a universal pad? Or is it a hazmat pad or roll? Do you use any rags or wipers? And if so, are they visible in the area if you would prefer to use those type of products? Conning Safety also has those types of products from us that we can help with your needs there. Are there any chemical drums or totes in the area? Do you need secondary containment? That is something that we can definitely help you out with our Conning Safety and NPS spill control product line also. And then to list any potential unsafe conditions that you may identify in the production or machine area, and we can get those absorbent products to you through Conning. In our chemical and oil storage areas, what are the types of the fluids? Do you use any chemicals? Besides our oil only and universal pads and rolls and spill kits, we also have unique pH neutral neutralizing liquids and dry powders for acids and caustics that can make them pH neutral, and then you absorb them with our pads and rolls. So that is something that Conning Safety has also. Do you have any absorbents or spill kits in the area in those places? Any secondary containment or spill berms to help with that area also in case there's a spill? If there's yes to any of those, please list those potential concerns. And in the outside area, Is the facility bordered by any bodies of water? If so, and do you have a chance that there might be a spill? Connie Safety has a lot of booms, which are just big oil-only socks that you can place out on the water to help pick up any kind of oil-based spill that gets out into your body of water that's nearby. If you have any storm drains or sewer concerns, you want to make sure you have a spill berm or some absorbent product near those areas, so if you have a spill, it does not get into the storm drain. Is there an outside storage area for fuels and chemicals or your oils? Do you have any spill kits in place to respond to them if you have that? Is there a sufficient secondary containment? You might have spill containment pallets on there to keep your drums on there. Please identify any needs that you might have and review that with your Connie Safety rep. And then last, please check with your tool crib. That's normally the area that they put all the storage of the absorbents. And if there's an absorbent rag or wiper that they're currently using, Connie Safety reps, please work with that person to see what they are currently using now, what's being stocked, what part numbers, what kind of monthly quantity, so you can cross those and get with me if you need, and I can help you identify what NPS Spill Control has to help your customer needs. And then the recommendations. So go back through this checklist that we have. I've got lines there. You make recommendations on the spill control products that are needed, and then we can help you out with those products. So that is our spill control checklist. It's a great little tool to walk around and check your facility, and the Connie Safety rep, you can use that product, our product mix, to help you out with this checklist and do it even on the phone and work with your person that way also. I appreciate the business and support of everyone at Connie Safety, and I truly thank all of you for your time today.
Kim Sykes is up next to talk about a U.S. commercial hand safety program for risk assessment from Mechanic's Glove.
Hi, my name is Kim Sykes. I am the National Account Manager for Mechanics Wear. Your regional sales manager is Mike Pryor. I will provide contact information after the presentation is over. So this program that we have is for the U.S. Commercial Hand Safety Program for risk assessment. It's our proprietary GloveSure program. It's our hand safety program, and it's proprietary to Mechanics Wear. It helps serve companies select the right protection, the right solution, and improve their safety for operational performance. The right glove for the right job, site assessments and facility assessments, hand safety audits, task and job-specific glove recommendations, return on investment and cost savings calculator, facility and employee training, and also a comprehensive glove consolidation program is everything that you'll get with our GloveSure hand safety program. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the hand injuries in the workplace, basically it's 7 out of 10 hand injuries the employee was not wearing a glove. The other 3 injuries, the employee was not wearing the right glove. The 5 most common hand injuries and causes would be 62% cuts and lacerations, such as cutting surfaces, handling sharp materials, cutting devices, moving parts. 14% would be crushes, impacts, smashes, and pinpoints. 8% are avulsions or detachments, meaning impacts or overextensions. 6% would come from punctures, so loose needles, nails, wires, and sharp points. 5% from fractures, that's impacts, smashes, and pinpoints. The others would be electrical burns, chemical exposure, frostbite, contusions, sprains, and strains. Now, this is where we're going to dive into the important items. So there are cut and impact test standards. We have CE or the EN 388, the ANSI standard, which is 105, and the ANSI 138. Now, the difference between CE or EN and ANSI is CE-EN is a worldwide standard. The ANSI standards are known in the United States. So we're really going to focus on the ANSI standards, but just know that mechanics wear tests for CE and also for the ANSI standard. The CE standard, just to give you a high-level overview, the standard is, the old standard used to be abrasion, cut, tear, and puncture. The new standard added 2 additional options. So you have a more improved cut, and you also have impact. So you have abrasion, cut, tear, puncture, cut, which is TDM, and impact protection. If you aren't very familiar with making sure that you know what the numbers correlate to, one easy task that I've learned is ACT-P. It gives you just a quick point of reference to try to understand where and what each of those numbers mean. So again, you have abrasion, cut, which is a COOP test, tear, puncture, another cut test, which is a TDM test, and the impact protection. As I said earlier, we're going to really dive into the ANSI standard because that is what is generally used in the United States. This slide in particular will help show you exactly what type of cut hazard you all will need. So from A1 to A9, A1 being the minimal cut, A9 being the extreme cut. So this slide shows you the minimal, light, light to medium, medium, medium to heavy, heavy cut, high cut, very high cut, and extreme cut, which would be the A9. The most beneficial is to understand the gram, because if you have an EN standard and an ANSI standard, the grams really make a difference to correlate exactly where the standard as it relates to cut level lies. So again, we're looking at the ANSI standard, and it goes from least amount of cut, which is A1, down to an A9, which is the actual highest cut rating glove that is out on the market. This is a new impact standard that was just enforced for ANSI. Now it tests the impact of where your fingertip and also your knuckle. So there's an ANSI standard 1, 2, or 3, depending on how much impact protection. So with the lowest impact protection being 1, then you have a level 2, and you have a level 3. Mechanics Wear has partnered with D3O for impact protection, and all of our testings will include impact protection when there's TPR on the back of the hand. As it relates to the GloveSure program and the assessment that we provide for Connie and also their end users, pretty much we look at the entire scope of the work. We review the facility, how many employees, their past purchase history, the size and reach, and the current glove assortment. We assess all of the samples based on our research. We create all of the qualifying questions. So these are the qualifying questions that you all can consider when looking at a risk assessment GloveSure program with Mechanics Wear. The key considerations when qualifying for the right glove would be, is there cut resistance needed? Is there impact protection? Dexterity needed? Grip? Are we looking at weather? Are we looking at contaminants such as oil, fluid, OBM, mud or water, fit and comfort, and heat resistance? A few qualifying questions for you to understand how to find the right glove is, what is the task or job? What are the performance requirements? Is there grip and dexterity? What cut hazards are present or cut level requirements? What impact hazards or impact level requirements? Step 1 is discussing the issues with the safety manager or project manager. So overall qualifying issues, identifying injury types, specifically recordables. So any type of lost time injuries, the most common injuries, understanding operations and operational job functions, and understanding the most hazardous jobs. Step 2, facilities hazard risk assessment. Make sure you have PPE head to toe. Observe and document facility operations. Identify and document facility hand safety hazards and performance needs, such as impacts, pinches, smashes, cuts and lacerations, so any type of cut hazard. Grip and dexterity, or are there any chemical contaminant issue exposures? The post-assessment is basically measuring and understanding the value. Identify consolidation and comprehensive glove program opportunities, key finding and glove recommendations report, best option to eliminate any injuries, improve longevity, documenting cost savings and return on the investment, and review physical sample best solution options based on the recommendations. Step 4, trial and evaluation and plan review. Providing a timeline for trial and evaluation samples to arrive at the end user facility. With MechanicsWare, we are very strong in support of making sure that we have a 7 to 14-day trial period. It allows us to review the recommendations and also get documented feedback from the trial results from your end user. Step 5, we review, close, and protect the hand. We review the findings, finalize a glove matrix that's going to best suit your customer's needs, plan and execute a new glove program with timelines, provide cost savings and potential ROIs, pricing and cost considerations, usage details and requirements, and then we close. The contact information, as I stated earlier, Mike Pryor is the regional sales manager for the Midwest area. He covers Chicago, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Missouri, and I'm the national account manager, Kim Sykes. Thank you all for participating in the risk assessment and virtual training with Connie Safety. We look forward to helping you soon.
Kevin Morrissey is here talking about 3M Safety and Inspection Manager System.
Hello, my name is Kevin Morrissey, and I'm with our 3M Connected Safety business. And I'm going to talk today about our 3M Safety and Inspection Manager System. What the Safety and Inspection Manager System allows customers to do is if you have to complete inspections or checks on equipment, workers, or workplaces, and you've been typically using paper to complete those inspections, you can utilize the system to digitize that process. Fundamentally, what we are is we're an asset tracking and compliance-based solution. So how we do this is on a mobile device, you would download an app that you're familiar with, and we help customers manage 3 categories: equipment, workers, and workplaces. Typically, we start with equipment. A lot of times it's safety equipment, things like fall protection or respiratory protection, but it can really be applied to almost any type of equipment that you have to do any type of inspection or check on. And so what we can do is we can configure the system to be able to allow you to complete those inspections on your mobile device. In addition to completing those inspections, we can also do things with equipment like check in and check out. And so how I kind of describe this is it's kind of like a library system. Whereas if you have a centralized location where you're storing equipment and you're checking those out to workers or job sites for a short duration of time, we can help you manage the flow of where that equipment is. We can also help assign equipment to individuals so that you can track what equipment has been assigned to those workers. With all of that, if you put equipment into our system, we can help you create an inventory to understand what type of equipment that you have. The next category that I'll talk about is workplace or area inspections. Similar concept to equipment inspections. This time though, if you have to complete a check or inspection on an area or workplace, whether that's large or small, you can utilize the system to complete that inspection or check. The middle category are workers. We have the ability with the system to help you track issuance rules, record training, medical approval status, or fit testing for your workers. And although we're not a content creator for training, what our system allows you to do is kind of be a front-end awareness of, are these workers up to date on any required tasks that they need to have? So for example, you have a piece of equipment, you want to ensure that the equipment is inspected and checked, but before you give that equipment to an individual worker, you also want to ensure that they're up to date on any required training in order to get that equipment. In addition to the issuance rules that we can track in training, we can also, as I mentioned, assign equipment to individual workers, and you can also complete worker inspections or observations. Similar concept to an equipment inspection, this time you're just applying it to a worker. So you may have things like, is the worker wearing the correct PPE? Are they operating safely? Or maybe you want to apply that to contractor workers that are coming on site. Again, customizable to whatever types of questions that you may have. How we do all of this again is you have an app on a mobile device, and we support Android and iOS devices. And then we utilize initiation devices that are attached to the equipment. So we use RFID tags, barcodes, or unique names, and you can use a combination of any of those. Basically, all you have to do is scan that RFID tag. It brings up that piece of equipment. You can complete your inspection. You do not have to have Wi-Fi or cellular capability on your mobile device as you're completing the inspection. Then just store your information permanently. That device will sync to the cloud, store your information, and you have a traditional web page that you'd be able to access to get more in-depth dashboard and reporting. The workflow is extremely easy. As I mentioned, on a mobile device, you scan an RFID tag or barcode, it brings up your inspection. You're able to complete the inspection. You can add additional notes or photos for documentation. Again, then you just sync, and you would go to the web page to be able to analyze your data. If you are utilizing 3M DBI Sala fall protection products, they have an RFID tag that's already attached to that piece of equipment. On that RFID tag, it has product information, and we've also created checklists already for most 3M safety products, but also some general checklists as well. So that can be easily incorporated into the system. That said, if you're utilizing a non-3M product or some other type of piece of equipment that you want to check, all we have to do is apply an RFID tag, utilize a barcode, maybe even utilize a barcode that's already on the product, or we can give it a unique ID. So we do a lot with safety equipment, things like fall protection or respiratory protection, but the system can also be applied to operational equipment, everything from ladders, hoists, manufacturing type of equipment. And we do a lot with safety or at the ready equipment, things like fire extinguishers, eye wash stations, safety showers, AEDs, first aid kits, etc. Again, any type of, the system is really customizable to do almost any type of equipment inspection that you have to complete. A couple of operational functions of the system that I'm going to highlight. One of the things that we can allow you to do is what's called a quick scan. And basically what a quick scan does is it just gives you instant details on your equipment status. So let's say you have a piece of equipment, you're not sure maybe who it belongs to or the last time it's been inspected. All you have to do is select quick scan. It brings up this initiation window to scan the RFID tag or barcode. When you do that within seconds, it gives you information on that equipment. So it tells you things like what the equipment is, the status, the last time a checklist was completed, what the result of that checklist was, who completed the inspection. And again, if that equipment was assigned to an individual worker, it would show up what worker that was. When you actually want to complete inspections on equipment, it's the same concept. You basically select checklist, brings up that same initiation window. When you scan the RFID tag, it brings up your piece of equipment. And here, one of the key concepts is that you can have multiple types of checklists for the same piece of equipment. And those checklists can be scheduled events or unscheduled events. So you can have an annual inspection, a monthly inspection, or you can have an on-demand inspection, which basically means there's no set schedule. You just select the checklist you want to complete. The questions again come up. You complete your questions to complete your checklist. And then when you're done, your checklist is successfully completed and all your information will be stored. Once you then have your checklist, you would then complete it. You would go to the web page And here we have a variety of dashboards and reports that allow you to filter the information and results that you're looking for. So you can look at high level statistics, or you can get into individual details on the inspections. How we work with customers, we'd like to go through a phased approach to make this as easy as possible. So we start with a pre-implementation where we'll understand what type of equipment that you have, what type of checklist that you have created, or if you want to incorporate that, we put that all into the system. Typically, we would come on site, but we're also doing web training currently for customers to make sure that they're trained and able to utilize the system. And then post-implementation, we have a client success manager who will work with you to understand what type of reports or information or additional training that you may need in the future. All along, we have a good support that helps you to get the most out of the system. So that's the 3M Safety and Inspection Manager system. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us.
Next up is Philip Young from Pyramix talking about their H2 Max anti-fog glasses and what makes them different than other glasses on the market.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to view this. My name is Philip Young. I'm a territory sales manager for Pyramix Safety. Today, we're going to be talking about our H2 Max anti-fog technology. So we'll get started with a quick little video about H2 Max.
Fogging glasses on the job. Open the door for potential hazards. When you can't control the elements, control your eyewear. Pyramix introduces the H2 Max anti-fog coating, the safest option in fog prevention. Using innovative H2 Max technology to keep glasses clearer for longer. The H2 Max coating is also resistant to abrasions and chemicals. For maximum clarity in fogging conditions, look for H2 Max. The difference is clear.
Okay, so what is H2 Max? That's kind of what we wanted to start with. So some of the things here that we're going to talk about today is a little bit about what it is, the history of it, some of the technical terms, how H2 Max anti-fog coating is applied, how we do some of our packaging that goes along with that, some competitor lingo and things that you hear in regards to the market talking about all the different terms when people talk about high-end anti-fog. And then we're going to end with a couple of things that are really cool. ANSI's got some new standards where now they're doing a mark of an X testing to high-end anti-fog and kind of the importance of anti-fog now, especially in light of COVID. So kind of starting off, let's talk about, what is H2 Max? H2 Max is Pyramix's high-end superior anti-fog coating for safety eyewear. So, anti-fog coatings have been around for a while. We've got kind of a standard one that we've had out for a long time. Then H2X was our kind of high-end anti-fog that we brought in probably several years ago, 5 years ago or so. So H2 Max is now we would call kind of our better option, and H2 Max being our best option. So kind of going recapping that, there's a standard anti-fog coating. H2X is our better version, H2 Max being our highest end, best version. So we started H2 Max in 2016. Pyramix launched it. So a couple of things about that. We brought it in originally on a goggle style glass called the Isotope back in 2016. As you saw from the video, that's been a big push for us. We've started also making some flyers and information talking about H2 Max, how it competes with a lot of our competitors. And then we originally brought it out at a lot of the big safety conferences and safety shows, ASSE, National Safety Council, A+A. So we've had it out for a few years, but obviously, especially in light of COVID, with everybody having to wear masks, it's been a very big, important topic. So the history of H2 Max, as I mentioned, the isotope was the first item that we brought in with that high-end anti-fog coating. We brought it in a few different lens options: clear, gray, and amber. As you can see, the next glasses that pop up are Everlight Proximity and V2G. Then we continue to add more and more products: our Venture 3, our FlexLight, Sightcore, iTech, Neshoba. Then as well some sealed foam padded eyewear like the Endeavor Plus, the Fixate, Capture, a few other goggle options like the Capstone, Torser, XSG, and the Loadout. So we've got a bunch of different options now. We have multiple lens color options as well. So let's talk a little bit about what H2 Max technology is. A lot of terms that you'll hear thrown around in regards to high-end anti-fog coating. A couple of them are hydrophobic and hydrophilic. So hydrophobic is actually water-fearing. Go back to your chemistry classes years ago. Hydrophilic is the water-loving. So those are two terms that you hear a lot. So what does that necessarily mean? Hydrophobic means it repels water. So think about when you have an anti-fog coating on your glass, as body temperatures heat up, or you're wearing masks in a lot of cases, you're going to create condensation and water and heat. That hydrophobic coating is going to repel the water and push it off of it. Hydrophilic is just the opposite. It means water loving, mixes with water. So is H2 Max hydrophobic or hydrophilic? It's actually a little bit of both. So we talked about in that video, we mentioned, it's good with chemicals and abrasion. So H2 Max reaction to the elements is the hydrophobic side of it. So it keeps it from fogging because of the hydrophobic properties. The hydrophilic properties is kind of the application adhesion. So dealing with chemicals, cleaning of glasses. A lot of times a normal anti-fog coating is just that. It's just a coating that goes over the glass. The hydrophilic properties actually help in the cleaning process where you're not removing the coating, or if you're dealing with chemicals or things like that, it's not going to remove that coating from the glass. So in summary, I guess on that, H2 Max is both hydrophobic and hydrophilic, but it is much more hydrophobic than it is hydrophilic. So this is actually a direct little pull from our H2 Max flyer where we talk about it. So, H2 Max innovative technology creates a high-performance, superior anti-fog coating that is durable enough to withstand repeated cleansings without losing adhesion. Not only does this premium treatment ensure maximum clarity to the most extreme temperature and humid conditions, but it also adds a layer to the lens abrasion and chemical resistance. H2 Max anti-fog technology is made from non-hazardous element components. The coating resists scratching from steel wool. It also passes the Z87 standards for the XCE and standards N and K for CE and Canadian standards as well. So you can kind of see on this slide here, the hydrophobic is reaction to cleanings. Hydrophilic is more adhesion strength. Reaction to the elements and weather, humid conditions, that's where you're going to see the hydrophobic properties stand out a lot more. So kind of seeing stuff on how they compare, anti-fog technologies versus normal anti-fog technologies versus H2 Max. You can see just from reading that slide here that, no fogging after an hour, dealing with steam, water, 60 seconds before fogging. When cleaning with soaps, resist 10 times before fogging. Cleaning with wipes or a towelette, a lot of these contain alcohol sometimes, so you can actually peel it off normally, but H2 Max will withstand that because of the hydrophilic properties as well. So let's talk a little bit real quick about the application process. When we make an H2 Max glass at our factories, it first starts off with the anti-static process. So that's to keep anything from sticking to the lens. So this is before we even put temples on a glass, nose piece, etc. This is just the lens itself. We do a supersonic washing to clean it, make sure it's perfectly clean. That's when you then add the H2 Max coating. Once that coating has been applied, it's then actually baked on through thermal curing in an oven. And then after that, it is placed into a bag. Most normal bags that we sell stuff in are a PP material, shiny and clear. For H2 Max, we actually use a high density polyethylene bag, HDPE. It's translucent, so it's kind of got that, you can kind of see from the picture here that it's kind of got a little bit more of a cloudy color, solvent resistant. We do it in that bag with that HDPE material because the coating won't stick to that bag like it would normally stick to a normal PP material. Slightly higher cost doing that, but obviously we take all that into consideration. So a little bit more in terms of user information on the sheet. We add this in all of our H2 Max products. So we've got just this little flyer that comes in it that talks about it, how to remove the debris before cleaning, rinse it with soap and water. You can use a cleaning cloth or a microfiber cloth to also help clean the lens and get all the dirt and grime off of it. H2 Max products can actually be cleaned with our lens cleaning towelettes, which I mentioned earlier. A lot of these lens cleaning towelettes have alcohol in them. Normal anti-fog coatings will actually be stripped off with an alcoholic wipe, whereas this, as we mentioned earlier, withstands chemicals and adhesion. So, everybody talks a little bit about anti-fog properties. How do you know what is a good anti-fog glass? Everybody says they've got the best one out there. So some terms and lingo to look for as you're looking for a good quality, high anti-fog option for end users. Is it a baked-in anti-fog coating? We talked about that earlier in the application process. Once the coating is put on, it's baked in a thermal curing oven. Long-lasting, can be cleaned. That's a big part of it because, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of anti-fog, standard anti-fogs can just be wiped off after time. Think about the same thing if you wear prescription glasses. You go to an eye doctor, you get prescription glasses, they put an anti-fog coating on it. A lot of times those coatings will last you a few months, depending on how often you're wearing it, and then they wear off over time, usually because of the cleaning process. The other big terms to look for when you're looking for a high-end anti-fog option is look for the terms like we talked about, hydrophobic or hydrophilic. Chemical resistant is another big point when you're looking for a high-end anti-fog option, because if it is something that can withstand chemicals, it's going to be able to last a lot longer. That's how you know it's a big one. And then also just the ratings. So the CE rating, they do theirs as CEEN 166N and K. The K is for fog resistance. The N is for scratch resistance. So again, why is this important now? Biggest thing, it's proven performance. We've had this in existence for a long time, for over 4 years now that we've been working with our high-end anti-fog coating. But especially now, in light of everything, with people being required to wear masks, high-end anti-fog is a necessity. I'm seeing constantly all the time folks that weren't previously using any anti-fog glasses. Now everyone is being required to have some sort of anti-fog glass because in the time period we were wearing masks or face shields, there's a lot more fogging issues. Another big reason why this is important to discuss right now is because the new ANSI standard, we're actually putting an X mark by the new ANSI standard that shows that it meets that high-end anti-fog coating. Not everyone's going to have that on there. In fact, actually, a lot of our base anti-fog coatings will not meet that standard, but all of our H2 Maxes will. And again, we mentioned, the most important thing is, as people are wearing masks and being required to have a lot of this stuff, a high-end anti-fog coating is something that's a necessity in the workplace. Hopefully this is helpful. Please let us know if you have questions. Thank you for your time.
Next up is Ann from Honeywell.
Hello, everyone. This is Ann Special. I'm with Honeywell Respiratory Protection. I am the respiratory specialist for our North Central zone, which is the Midwest into the Dakotas. My contact information is also on this slide along with my cell phone number. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Honeywell Respiratory what we offer, and just kind of an overview overall in respiratory protection. So Honeywell has a total respiratory solution. We offer from the disposable respirators, and today with everything going on and with the pandemic and so forth, this is a topic that's very commonly spoken about. And the disposable respirators, they do include the N95s, the N99s, the P95s, or the P100s. We do also offer air purifying respirators, or commonly referred to as APRs, and we do have those in a half face and full face series. We have our powered air purifying respirators, or otherwise PAPRs or PAPRs, and those are offered with both tight fitting respiratory as well as loose fitting. And then we have our supplied air and SCBAs, also our escape units, which are used in escape type emergency situations. And then we offer different services, solutions, and training, all related to respiratory protection. Now, something to note when it comes to respiratory is it generally within OSHA violations comes within at least the top 10. This is the latest information from OSHA, and as you see, respiratory protection is number 4 for cited standard violations. And a lot of these sightings either include not wearing any respiratory protection, wearing the wrong type of respiratory protection, or just simply not having a written respiratory protection program in place. These are the different agencies and associations affiliated with respiratory protection. OSHA is your Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It monitors work-safe safety. NIOSH is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. Now, this certifies respirators. When we go over Honeywell's respirators, all of our respiratory products are NIOSH certified. So we do test and certify any respiratory products that you see before they hit the marketplace. And then ANSI, your American National Standards Institute. And then the one that's important also to go over is the ACGIH. And this is the governmental industrial hygienists. They're the ones that set exposure limits. Now, how do you select respirators? So first of all, you do need to understand the permissible exposure limits. So each contaminant has a PEL, and that's set by OSHA. So any work or working environment that has concentrations over a certain PEL level has to wear a suitable respirator. Now, there are NIOSH pocket guides. There's even an app you can download, and these are really good at looking at a certain contaminant, and it'll tell you what the assigned PEL is. So once you know that within the environment, you have to know which respirator to choose within that given assigned protection factor. And then we'll kind of go over the different protection factors. So you multiply that, and then you get the maximum use concentration. So this is the maximum allowed use concentration for that respirator. Now, if this exceeds an IDLH, so if there's potential hazard exposure, or such as an oxygen deficient environment where you would need an SCBA, then you would go into an SCBA or an escape unit. So these are the protection factors. This is a little good cheat sheet to have. Some of these, such as the APR in a full face, that will depend on whether you use a qualitative or quantitative fit test. And then the PAPRs, again, if a manufacturer can provide data, it can be up to 1,000 protection factor. And then we go all the way up to our SCBA line, which gives you a protection factor of up to 10,000. And again, these are all items that Honeywell offers, and it's a good cheat sheet to selecting respiratory protection. So I did want to go into, we talked about the disposables, the APRs and the PAPRs. This is a product that we had launched within the last year or two. We've also included upgrades in cartridge selection for this. This is our Premier PA700. It's also available in a decon, which means if employees have to go through where they have to don and doff and clean and decon. These are options available to them for that. Some of these you do find, such as in a nuclear site cleanup, heavily used in pharmaceutical manufacturing. We're also using a lot of it in laboratories where there's drug mixing or different testing done on drugs. Also in the asbestos lead type abatement demolition industry, and then also when you go into disaster cleanup. Some of the features of our PA700, it's lightweight. It has different breathing tubes, so you can switch from that tight-fitting facepiece to a loose-fitting facepiece. That smart breathing tube connection, it'll understand whether you're in a tight-fitting or loose-fitting, and it'll adjust the airflow accordingly. It has a side-mounted battery. It's very ergonomically friendly. It's light. Again, we offer in a HEPA filter. We also offer different cartridges for organic vapors within this PA700. A very efficient keypad. You can use gloves to use it. It has a 3-alarm feature. So if you're in an area where it's not maybe as visible, it also offers audio. It'll make a loud noise and it'll vibrate. So there's 3 different features that alarm to keep workers safe within any airflow restrictions or a low battery type indicator. And this also shows the kind of almost the full line of both tight fitting and loose fitting respiratory selection. So you have hoods. These hoods, because they are loose fitting, they do not need a fit test for the PAPRs, whereas in tight fitting, you would need a fit test. But they also come in fire retardant. You can have a hard hat attached to it in those areas where you need a hard hat. Here we have a welding lens cover. So there's many different options you can choose and pick from depending on the application. Now, OSHA does require a medical evaluation for respiratory protection. We at Honeywell do offer an online medical OSHA cert. It's basically if you have a computer, access to the internet, you can log on to the site, register for it, and then take the evaluation online. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and you will get an answer as to a pass or fail. Once you have a medical clearance, you will need a fit testing. This is a good cheat sheet for, perhaps if you want to put up in a work site or whatnot. It shows it's from the CDC NIOSH. It does show what a good clean shaven look looks like. And if you want little cheat sheets or little refreshers, we do have YouTube. They're about 5-10 minutes long. You can go on there. It'll show you how to fit test, how to properly don and doff a respirator and other needed respiratory things. And then OSHA requires record keeping. This is a list of what you would put on with the record keeping for Appendix A. And these are forms for both qualitative and quantitative. If you need a little fit test record cheat sheet, this is a good printout that you could use while you fit test to show what type of respirator, who it was fit tested, and then you would keep them within a record. And if you do need to order fit test kits, we do have a variety, both irritant smoke and the bitter that you could use for your fit testing. Thank you for your attendance, and my information is on the PowerPoint, so if you do have any questions, I will be more than glad to assist. Thank you.
Last is Connie's own certified safety professional, Katie Olson, talking about applying traditional safety techniques and risk assessments pertaining to COVID-19.
Hello, my name is Katie Olson. I am a certified safety professional and national safety consultant with Connie Safety. Today, we're going to be talking about a very traditional safety technique, the risk assessment, and how it can be used to be specifically applied to COVID-19 in the workplace. During this presentation, we'll take a look at some of the basics around risk assessments. What is a risk assessment? What is the difference between a hazard analysis and a risk assessment? Two phrases that get used interchangeably quite a bit. And then we'll take a look at two different types of risk assessment, both the qualitative risk assessment and the quantitative risk assessment. And then we'll take a look at how each of those will apply to COVID-19. First things first, what is a risk assessment? Well, a risk assessment basically is a systematic, consistent approach to identifying and classifying risks within an organization. It is recognized as a best practice, and some regulatory standards may even require it. And the really great thing about a risk assessment is that it can be applied to any different industry and different types of risks. So if you're looking at, operational risk, financial risk, environmental risk, etc., a risk assessment is going to be able to help you identify and manage your risks appropriately. There are some important terms that we need to be aware of when it comes to talking about risk assessments. A lot of people, like I mentioned before, use hazard and risk interchangeably, but we need to understand from a safety perspective that these are not the same thing. So for example, COVID-19 is a hazard, but your risk of contracting it depends on several different factors, as we will discuss a little bit later in this presentation. So remember that hazard is always something that's going to cause harm. I always like to tell people in my training that a hazard is really a condition that exists in the workplace that can cause harm to your employees. So, things like electrical hazards, fall hazards, those are things that are existing. A risk, however, is a combination of the probability and severity of that hazard causing harm. And we'll look at it in just a little bit. Just because you have a hazard doesn't necessarily mean that you have a risk, and I'll explain that in just a little bit. Two other terms that I want to be really careful with and really make a key to differentiate here are the terms analysis and assessment. So analysis really is getting an explanation of the nature or meaning of something, doing a careful study of something to learn about all of its parts, whereas an assessment is the act of making a judgment. We could do an analysis, and then after the analysis, we may want to make a decision or an action plan of how to move forward to correct something. And that is what we're going to be doing in a risk assessment. So again, as I mentioned earlier, hazard and risk are different, so we don't want to use them interchangeably. A hazard can exist while posing no risk to people or property if that hazard is completely isolated. A hazard analysis, therefore, is really just the first part of a risk assessment. If you take a look at the graphic here on the screen, risk assessments then takes the hazard analysis one step further by assigning each hazard a risk value based on both the likelihood that that hazard is going to result in harm and the potential severity of that harm if someone were to get injured. There are two different types of risk assessments that are used commonly in the safety world. The first is a qualitative risk assessment, and as the name suggests, it is strictly based off of definitions and key descriptions, right? We're not really looking at any data here. Qualitative risk assessments define the severity, likelihood, and level of risk by using terms such as high, medium, or low. The problem with this, though, is that it is pretty subjective. It's based on opinions, beliefs, or judgments. So if I were performing a qualitative risk assessment on a day when I was feeling really good and upbeat, I probably would rank things a little bit lower than if I came in to do a risk assessment on a day where I, maybe wasn't in such a good mood and had kind of a negative outlook on the world. So we need to make sure that we're being as objective as possible. And the way that we do that with a qualitative risk assessment is just to get more people involved so that you kind of have more of a leveling out of some of those judgments or opinions, right? So we're not quite as biased when we're performing the risk assessment. I will say, though, that these are the most commonly used type of risk assessments just because of the sheer ease of applying it to so many different industries. It can be applied, across the board, and there's really not a whole lot of work that goes into training people on how to perform these qualitative risk assessments. So one main tool that we use with a qualitative risk assessment is the qualitative risk matrix. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, you can see that we're using just kind of keywords here, right? There's really no numerical values that are being assigned to the risk. And so we really have our three categories, low, medium, and high, our green, yellow, and red, that is going to tell us essentially what our risk level is, and then help us move forward with determining what type of corrections that we need to put in place. So you can see that there's very little description here. And because of that lack of description, that's where we get that subjectivity. So again, having more people involved with the qualitative risk assessment tends to be a little bit more beneficial. The next type of risk assessment is the quantitative. And quantitative, again, as the name suggests, means that we're going to be looking at data. So a quantitative risk assessment assigns a fixed numerical value to both the severity and the likelihood of a hazard. And this is really nice because it increases the objectivity of the risk assessment, where with your qualitative risk assessment, you were really kind of just judging things based off of your opinions and beliefs on whether something would be a low or a high risk. Here in a quantitative risk assessment, we're actually assigning a numerical value to each one of those categories based on existing data. And just kind of to fast forward here and take a look, I give you an example. Just like we had our qualitative risk matrix, we also have a quantitative risk matrix. And this is one that you can find online. It's very commonly used, but what I really like about this is that it gives you a kind of a concrete definition in terms of what the different levels of severity would be. So for example, your lowest level of severity, let's say you have someone that's potentially going to get injured, and that's the hazard you're concerned about. The lowest level of severity is going to be a first aid, right? Something that we can manage here in our facility. The next step up from that would be if the person sustained an injury that potentially required medical treatment, right? Maybe it's a long-term injury or illness. So other ways that you can look at that would be, maybe first level is going to be a first aid. Your second level could be an OSHA recordable. Your third level would be an OSHA reportable, right? And we understand the difference between those things. And so having that clear, concrete definition around the different levels really helps to, as I mentioned before, make this more objective. If you know for sure that there's no way that this hazard is going to lead to a fatality or permanent death, disability, then it helps us to identify the severity level a little bit easier. Which can be very helpful when you are putting together your risk assessment, because ultimately at the end of the day, your goal through your risk assessment should be to get the risk level down for each hazard as much as possible. And to do that, we're really going to start to take a look at risk control and mitigation strategies. So once a risk has been identified and analyzed using your risk assessment tool, whether it be qualitative or quantitative, whatever the case may be, we need to put together a mitigation strategy. And the recommendation that we have here in the safety world is using the hierarchy of control. Any plan to control the risk should reduce the overall risk rating of the hazard. So we should be doing something through our control strategy to either reduce the overall severity of the hazard or reduce the likelihood that that hazard is going to result in an injury. As always, with using the hierarchy of control, we want to make sure that we're aiming towards using the method towards the top, right? Knowing that elimination or substitution are going to be the most effective ways to mitigate risk, knowing then that PPE is the least effective way to mitigate risk. And we'll look at some of the specific examples of that when we talk about COVID, which is actually the next thing that we're going to do. So I mentioned at the very beginning that risk assessments are a pretty traditional tool used in the safety world to help identify risks within an organization, and then how best to control those risks. Well, COVID, pretty similar to any other safety hazard, is the hazard, right? And so the level of risk to your employees really is going to depend on a number of things. The characteristics of the virus. We're learning more and more about this virus every day, how it is contracted, what are the signs and symptoms. the severity of resulting illnesses. Again, with this particular illness, we've seen a huge range between people who are contracting it and remain asymptomatic, all the way to people who, have to been put on ventilators, and many people who have died as a result of this illness. We know that a lot of the people who are really sick or have passed away, it is a result of them having a pre-existing medical condition that has kind of compounded the effects of COVID-19. And we have to think about any, availability of medical measures to control the impacts, So right now we're looking at testing. How can we get people tested? Are we, sure that we have the capabilities in our area to get our employees tested in a timely manner in the event that we think someone has been exposed to COVID? And further down the line, it's going to be, is there a vaccine, and do we have access to the vaccine? Do we have employees that have adequate access to a vaccine in the event that they have been come in contact with COVID? So based on that, there are a couple types of risk assessments that can be performed as it pertains specifically to COVID. But the one that we're going to take a look at today is really just a qualitative assessment. And this one is actually have been developed by OSHA. So OSHA has actually taken kind of the hazards based off of different job tasks and developed 4 levels of employee risk based on that. Each level is based on an employee's risk of being exposed to the virus, pretty much just kind of based on the industry, and then going into kind of the lack of social distancing or potential contact with contaminated surfaces. As of right now, to date, we understand that those are the 2 routes that someone could be exposed to the COVID-19 virus. When performing the assessment, this qualitative assessment, employers should determine if employees could potentially come in contact with someone. So whether they're going to be in close contact with several people over the course of the day, or if they could be potentially exposed to environments or materials contaminated with the virus. So thinking about, even employees that, maybe are socially distancing where they're not coming in contact with other individuals, but they're having to use a lot of shared workspaces. So think of break rooms and things like that, where the virus could actually be deposited on surfaces and then picked up by other employees. So just a couple of other things to think about when it comes to performing this qualitative assessment. So qualitative, right? We're not dealing with numbers here. We're really kind of dealing with definitions, and this is the ranking system that OSHA uses on their website. And so they classify employees based on, again, the risk of exposure to known or suspected sources of COVID-19. So OSHA says that employees that are at a very high risk of contracting COVID are those that have exposure to known or suspected sources of COVID, people like healthcare workers performing aerosol generating procedures. All right, we know that this could potentially be how someone contracts COVID. We know that the virus is in those aerosolized droplets, right? So if we're doing those aerosolized generating procedures, we know that there is a huge risk there. Maybe even healthcare workers who are collecting or handling specimens, right? So think about the workers that are out there at the testing facilities that are actually testing people and carrying those specimens to the lab to be tested. And then, unfortunately, we have had so many instances where we've had deaths associated with the disease. So morgue employees who are having to perform autopsies, most of the time that consists of some type of aerosol generating operation. So if you have employees that are, in any of these categories, we definitely would consider those to be high risk employees. And so having identified that level of risk, then we would need to move forward to identify how we were going to correct that. And we'll talk a little bit more about control strategies in just a few minutes. Next, OSHA determines that there are employees with a high risk, so a little less severe of a risk, but not quite by much. These are people who are dealing with exposure to known or suspected sources of COVID, and there's a high potential, but not as high as those who are actually performing those aerosol generating procedures. So we have people who are support staff, right? People who enter patient rooms. Not too long ago, I was in the hospital after having having a baby. And there's all kinds of people who come in to see you, right? From nurses that come in to, take information from you, phlebotomists, people who are even delivering your food from the cafeteria, right? So those are people who aren't directly associated with patient care, but still potentially have exposure, right? Even janitorial or environmental services, right? They have the potential to come in contact. Medical transport workers. So you think about the EMS, right? Paramedics, people who are transporting patients that could potentially have COVID in enclosed vehicles, right? We know that lack of airflow is a huge factor when it comes to contracting COVID. So imagine being in a confined ambulance for the duration of a ride from, getting someone at their house to taking them to the hospital. And then again, unfortunately, due to the number of deaths, mortuary workers involved in preparing bodies for burial cremation. During this process, it's not as extensive as the autopsy process where we have those aerosol generating procedures, but again, we still have people who are coming in contact with bodily fluids potentially that could contract COVID. OSHA defines medium risk employees to be those who have jobs that require frequent close contact with people who may be infected but are not known to have COVID. So these could be employees who are working with travelers that are coming back from a hot spot. So, think about people who are working in an airport, or just people who have contact with the general public. There's a huge concern right now about people who will be working in schools once the kids go back, and if we decide to do in-person learning, right? So teachers and the rest of the school staff, retail staff, right? So a lot of retailers have been open since the beginning of the pandemic, and so their employees have potentially been or could potentially be exposed to COVID. And then government workers. I know for a long time here in Madison, places like libraries and other, government funded agencies had been closed, and they're starting to open up again. So as we see more and more interaction with the general public, we're going to see a higher risk associated with contracting COVID. And then another thing to be concerned about would be manufacturing employees that cannot maintain social distancing. So if you're working on a manufacturing line and you're standing, 2 feet away from the person next to you, there's very little chance that you're going to be able to social distance, right? So your risk actually goes up a little bit based on the fact that you can't maintain that social distance. And then finally, OSHA determines employees to be low risk if they have jobs that do not require contact with people who are known to be or have been suspected to be infected with COVID-19. So remote workers. Right now, I'm working remotely. Many people at Connie switched over to remote work when the pandemic started as a way to lessen our risk of contracting COVID, as well as lessening the risk that we were going to spread it. There are some situations where you could be working in an office setting. You're in your own office. You don't come in contact with anybody during the day. You can maintain social distancing. You are low risk in that particular situation. Healthcare workers who provide telemedicine services and, people like long distance truck drivers that it's very unlikely that they're going to come in contact with other individuals, or if they do, they can maintain that 6 foot of social distancing. That all lessens the risk that they are going to be infected with COVID-19. So what does this all mean? Knowing that we have these varying levels of risk to employees based on their potential exposure or, the job functions that they're performing, how do we then go about putting together an action plan to make sure that they are going to be safe when they go to work? Well, we're going to use the hierarchy of controls, as I mentioned before. Just like with any other safety hazards, we want to make sure that we understand that PPE is the least effective measure and should be the last line of defense. And when I say PPE, I mean all types of PPE, whether you are garbed up and donning a full half face or full face respirator, whether you have an N95 or whether you're just wearing one of the, basic cloth masks that you can get now at pretty much any retailer, it really is not a substitute for maintaining appropriate social distancing. So having that PPE is great, but you also want to look a little bit higher on that hierarchy of controls and start looking at some of maybe those administrative controls, right? Administrative controls in this particular situation would be things such as cleaning and disinfecting protocols, right? So if you are in an office setting where you can maintain that social distancing, but you do have shared spaces, we need to make sure that we're cleaning and disinfecting those stations appropriately and periodically throughout the day. And then also good hand hygiene. There is really no substitute for good hand hygiene when it comes to stopping the spread of COVID or any other disease. Finally, those engineering controls are a little bit higher on that hierarchy of control. We want to implement those as much as possible, really looking at isolating employees, implementing social distancing measures, and allowing employees to work from home really is the most effective way to protect employees. So if you work for a company where it is still feasible for you to have employees work from home, we strongly encourage that you continue to do that because it does significantly reduce the risk that those employees will either contract or spread COVID in the workplace. There are a great many resources when it comes to information about COVID and how it can be handled in the workplace that will really help you after you performed your initial risk assessment to identify the controls that you're going to be able to put in place. The CDC back in May published what they call their interim guidance for businesses and employers responding to coronavirus disease. And that's where you'll find all of the really great information regarding, what your cleaning protocol should look like. And there are even some really good industry specific guidelines from CDC. So whether you're working in a childcare facility, whether you're working in a manufacturer, whether you're working in, a poultry or meat processing plant even, it gives you some really good guidance specific to the hazards associated with those industries, which is super helpful when it comes to putting a control strategy in place. I also mentioned that the qualitative risk assessment that we just reviewed actually came from OSHA. And so they've done a really good job of putting together information regarding those different levels that we talked about. So whether someone is working in a job that is very high risk or low risk, they set out really good parameters for employers to follow to keep their employees safe during this pandemic. And then finally, if you are not familiar with our Connie Safety website, I highly recommend that you go to our Connie Safety Pandemic Response Library. In addition to finding a ton of response items that would make your life very easy when you return to work, you'll also find a lot of really good literature, some white papers from different vendors about their products, as well as some of the previous webinars that we've put on specific to the COVID response to help you formulate your plan for getting your employees back to work safely. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and for viewing this webinar today. If you have any questions regarding the content that was presented here or any of the products associated with COVID response, please feel free to reach out to the safety support team. We have a team of 5 safety professionals that are willing to help you and take a look at any of your needs. We can even go so far as to help you put together a plan or perform a risk assessment at your workplace to help make sure that we are getting our employees back to work safely. Thank you very much and have a great day.
All right, thank you to all the vendors. So as mentioned before, we won't be doing a live Q&A, but we will leave the webinar open for a few minutes here for people to submit questions, which we will make sure to get answered for you. Also, for people who sent in questions with your registration, if your questions were not answered in these presentations, we will make sure and follow up on those answers as well. Thanks again for joining and have a great day. Also, if you want to forward or to rewatch this webinar, it will be available on Connie's website shortly. Also, this is Connie's third SafetyCon, so if you missed any of the previous ones or any webinar Connie has done in the past, you can certainly find them on our website as well.